Okay. You start that? Oh, man, you're on the wrong. Okay, yeah, for just kind of bringing everybody up to date, this is a Revelation study. We're actually in chapter 18 tonight, so we'll be handling a couple of those chapters tonight. For those that are going to watch on YouTube later, we're covering this from a real basic standpoint, a fundamentals type thing. We're putting a skeleton and a few muscles on. We're not trying to dig deep. We're not going and spending hours on a verse or anything like that. Just giving an overview of the book of Revelation so that you can go from here and study on your own. I'm also approaching it from a future standpoint. That is, most of the Revelation, especially beginning at chapter 4 and on, is still future, has not been fulfilled yet. We're still looking at that. And we're also looking at things from a literal standpoint. That is, we accept things at face value unless it just kind of looks goofy and we're not sure. And then we start looking for symbols. We don't look for symbols first. We look at it face value and accept it as that. So, and then, then realizing that obviously there are a lot of symbols in the book of Revelation. So I think the danger is if you look for symbols first, and you approach God's Word symbolically, then you miss a lot of the literal teaching of God's Word, the plain teaching, and you start symbolizing, well, Jesus didn't really rise from the dead, it was just symbolic. Well, that's when you get in trouble, when you start doing those things. So anyway, just to kind of let everybody know, that's we'll be watching on YouTube, plus those who are new in here tonight, how we're going to approach this. All right, we finished up with chapter 17 last week. Now you have here...
No,
No, start
we
with
finished up
17.
with 16. We started with 17.
Oh, we're starting with 17. Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought we finished 17. All right.
You were in the woods a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me get a cup of
That's
the ice cream's got my brain.
what it was.
Okay. You have in chapters 17 and 18 now another parenthetical section. Now, we've been talking about these as we go along. You have to know where these are in the book of Revelation. Can somebody tell me why? Why do you have to know where these are?
Because it stops the story and starts the previous.
What stops? The timeline stops. In other words, we'll be going along and we've got the scroll is taken and the first seal is open and the second seal and the third seal and the fourth seal and the fifth seal, and we're going along the timeline here, right? Then all of a sudden, John, led of the Holy Spirit, stops in the timeline and he jumps out of the timeline and explains a truth of some kind. Or maybe a whole bunch of truths. Now, while he's explaining these, hey, bud, you need something?
See,
Come in.
one come in.
Okay, come on in. While he's explaining this, time is not advancing on. In fact, in these parenthetical sections, he may actually go way back into history and go forward into future and then jump back out of it, and then boom, he starts with 6, and then he starts with 7. So you've got to know where those are, and we have one labeled here for those who have your notes. This begins the next parenthetical section, chapters 17 and 18. And it's a description and story of 2 Babylons. I put those in quotation marks. One is referred to as the great harlot, and the other one is referred to as a beast. In fact, we're going to see here in a minute that the great harlot is actually riding the beast. And you may have seen these. Okay, all right, well, gee, we might have some symbols here, right? Because this is kind of getting wow, this is what does this mean? So there's a lot of symbolism in these 2 chapters. We're going to look at it as face value as much as we can, but realizing that there's probably a lot of symbols here. Of course, one reason that God in His Word uses symbols is because they are eternal. When you tell somebody it's round as a wheel, well, that means the same thing 100 years ago as it means today. We understand that symbolic reference. Slow as molasses. Everybody knows what that means,
Yes.
and that's a symbolic statement. All right. Which is not what I am. I really go fast, so hang on. But anyway, and here again, the ground rule is, if you have a question, raise your hand, because I go on automatic pilot and I get into it and I'm going, and here we go, and buckle your seatbelt. So anyway, we have this, up to this point, I'll just draw a little, let me get rid of this. Now everybody understand about the parentheticals. You've got to know where those are. If you don't, and you're just reading through Revelation, you'll be going along and you'll say, okay, we're halfway through the tribulation time. And then it'll start talking about this woman giving birth to the child, referring to Christ. And the dragon is waiting to devour the child in Revelation 12. He said, whoa, wait a minute, that's the birth of Jesus. That's way back. See, so if you don't know where those are, then you get really confused. So you've got, and that's why I labeled those very clearly. You can see where they're at. This is a parenthetical section. Now, for those that I apologize for those of you who don't have materials. I'm sorry, we should have had some, and that's my fault. But if we were to draw this 7-year period that we call the tribulation time, all right, it begins sometime when God starts it. We really don't have anything to indicate exactly when it starts. I am a pre-trib rapture guy. I believe that the church will be taken out of here before the tribulation starts. Now, two things about that. One is, that doesn't mean that everything is going to be rosy up until that point. The church goes out and then all the world goes to Hades. I think we're going to go through some stuff too, and I say we because I think we are that generation before when Christ is going to take us out of here. Now, I've got good friends, I got a lot of people that I know that believe the church is going to go out at the halfway point. Well, that's okay. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to fall on the sword on that. I'm not going to argue about it. But I take a pre-trib position on the rapture. So the first thing to remember is we're probably going to go through some stuff. Okay? So that's why I say have your hurricane supplies ready to last maybe months. I'm telling you, you know, you all think I'm crazy and I'm a prepper. I'm just saying you really need to be prepared because things could really get stupid. And just think if tomorrow you couldn't use your credit cards. It happened in Cyprus for what, 30 days? Not long ago? What if you couldn't use your credit cards for the next 30 days? What would you do? Just think about that. I'm just getting you to think, okay?
Come to your house.
What, come to my house? Except, I probably won't be at my house. I have a plan.
You just go to the stick
Okay,
march.
yeah, go to stick march. That's it. That's where the stick march. Okay, we'll live off the land. The other thing that I wanted to say is, when the rapture happens, that doesn't immediately begin the time clock for the tribulation time. There can be a period of time in here. There can be months, and I don't think it's going to be 10 years or 20 years, but there can be a period of time in here. The rapture does not start the 7-year time clock. It's going to be close. It's going to be some time, but I think there's going to be some time in here for things to settle, and then this Antichrist is going to come on the scene that we saw in chapter 6, 7, and on. Okay? So everybody with me. I'm kind of reviewing here a little bit. That's okay. We have now started with the seals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And what happened on the 7th seal? What was handed out? 7 what?
Roll of it and
Trumpets. 7 trumpets. I know it's pitiful, but it's the best I can do. Okay? All right. Then there were 7 trumpets. And what happened on the 7th trumpet? Then 7 vials, bowls, or whatever were given. Now, and those have all been poured out. So we're going to put right here, this is the end of the tribulation time. So if we were to be at the mall with the X, you are here, we would have to say on this timeline of the 7 years, we're right here somewhere with chapter 17 and 18. We're right there. We're right at the end. Okay? Because those bowl judgments have been poured out. Now, why don't I put a squiggly mark at halfway? What's important about the midpoint of the tribulation time?
That's when the Antichrist is going to.
Lose his ever-loving mind, okay?
Shows
This-
his true colors.
Well, yeah.
Show his true color.
Now remember, he dies here, and the false prophet brings him back to life. I'm of the opinion that when he comes back to life, he's going to impersonate the incarnation. Jesus was God in the flesh. I think he's going to be Satan in the flesh, and I think that's why it's going to be. All Hades is going to break loose right through here. This part's called the tribulation. This is called the Great Tribulation because it really gets intense during these last 3.5 years. A lot of wrath. All right. Now we can also see, too, what happened when the 7th seal was opened up. There was what in heaven for 30 minutes? Silence, okay? Now guys say that's because there's no women in heaven. Women say that's because there's no guys in heaven. Right? Don't go there. That's going to get you in trouble. The reason there's silence is why?
they saw.
What's in this 7th one?
What's gonna happen?
all the rest of it.
A whole bunch. I mean, that's why there's like, it's almost like shock and awe in heaven. They just can't believe what's going to happen here. Okay, so that kind of brings us up to speed. We're right here at the end. And of course, we've got what we call the millennium, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. That comes after that, that goes on out. And then there's a little incident that happens at the end of the millennium. And we'll talk about that when we get to it, so I won't get ahead of myself. Okay. All right, any question on this? All right, here we go. Verse 1 of chapter 17. 10-minute introduction. That wasn't too bad for me. It's okay. I'm in chapter 17, verse 1. I don't have any more handouts. I'm sorry.
I thought that was a wrap-up.
Yeah, no. I'm sorry. I apologize to you guys, too. I'm sorry. I'll have more next week. We'll run off some. Chapter 17, verse 1. Now, one of the angels who had poured out the 7 bowls, remember these are these 7 bowls here that got poured out, he came over and spoke to me and said, "Come with me, and I will show you the judgment that is going to come on the great prostitute who rules over many waters. The kings of the earth have committed adultery with her, and the people who belong to this world have been made drunk by the wine of her immorality." Now, if we take this just at face value, we say, wow, there was this woman and these kings had sex with her. And that's, that's literal. But obviously, probably we could look for some symbolism here. And what we're dealing with here are 2 Babylons. So I want to talk about Babylon for just a minute. There's the religious Babylon, referred to as the Great Harlot. Now, in the Old Testament prophets, if you've ever studied Isaiah and Jeremiah and Hosea and all those, God uses this pictorial language for His people Israel when they quit worshiping the true God. And remember, Jehovah God was the husband and Israel was the wife. And when Israel left her husband God and went out to Baal and Moloch and all these, she was committing quote-unquote adultery. See the pictorial language there? So the Old Testament prophets used this. John in his day, that would have been clear understanding to him. To us, it may seem a little strange. But that's the pictorial language because these people are not uniting religiously, spiritually with the true God, but with false gods. And so they are committing adultery because God is the true God. So you see the picture there? So you have Babylon, religious Babylon, here in chapter 17. This whole chapter is about her. She's riding this beast, which is also called Babylon. And that's in chapter 18. We're going to look at the fall of that particular one. This Babylon in chapter 18 is the political or government. I probably should have said government. It's a government structure. All throughout the ages, government leaders have used religion for their own manipulation to control people. And that's all this is, except it's that on steroids in this case. So you have the Antichrist using his government and using religion to accomplish his rule, but when he gets in charge, he's done with this and he destroys it. Okay? So that's what chapter 17 is, where we'll see how this is destroyed. Now, the only other thing I want to kind of talk about a little bit is the idea here of Babylon. Now, is this ancient Babylon? Some problems with that. Jeremiah 50 and 51, some other places and other prophets said that Babylon will never be rebuilt. So if that's the case, how's it going to get rebuilt if God's Word says it ain't going to get rebuilt? So there's a struggle there. Plus, when political, governmental Babylon is destroyed, they see the smoke and the destruction the merchant ships do from the water. It'd be kind of hard to see this one from the water because this is not really near the water. So there's several things. Plus, John refers to it as a city. So you have, that's Babylon calling right there, man. But you have, no, you're fine, I'm messing with you. This, we have to say, okay, to take it at face value, boy, there's some things I struggle with. It's referred to as a city. Babylon, the city, was an empire. It's seen destroyed from the sea. Could it be that God is speaking symbolically here, and that the things that are going on the earth during this time are like what was going on in ancient Babylon? See what I'm getting at? And that's probably what is being used here, is a pictorial symbolism. Because Babylon, remember, represented, if you go back to Genesis, Nimrod. Nimrod was a person who, like Esau, did not have time for God. He was also, and you can analyze this for whatever you want to, I have a feeling in this day and age we know what it means. He was a seeker of men. So I think we had that way back there then. So you also had the Tower of Babel. And we know that was a bunch of people getting together and saying, we're gonna make it to heaven without God. We don't need God. We'll make it there ourselves. And so, of course, God confounded that. So everything about Babylon is anti-God. All right. So Babylon represents a system that says, I don't need God. I can make it myself. I can do it myself. Man, do we see that philosophy today? We don't need God. We don't need God 9/11. We're going to build them back. We don't need God. We don't need to repent. We don't need to get on our face before God like they did Pearl Harbor. We can build back. We can do better. We're going to build them taller, Donald Trump says. So that mentality and philosophy after 9/11 did not put us on our face before God and say, God, we have failed. We have forgotten you. We've kicked you out of schools. We've kicked you out of our society. We've got your word out there, and we don't let teachers. If they have a Bible on their desk, they get in trouble. I mean, and we didn't repent. So this anti-God, we don't need God philosophy is very, very prevalent today. So that's probably what this represents. So if Babylon isn't like real Babylon, then where is it? And you have two Babylons. You have the religious Babylon. You have the political one. So there's some possibilities here. Is it the ancient Babylon? I tend to think probably I would disqualify that one. Is it Jerusalem? Why would I say that? Of course, you got two of them here that I got to fill these, right? In other words, you got two different Babylons. Why would I say it might be Jerusalem? What religiously is going on in Jerusalem?
Fight between the Muslims and the Jews.
Well, not now, but I mean during this time, what's going to be happening in Jerusalem?
Well, the temple's going to be rebuilt.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Antichrist comes on the scene, and he allows the temple to be rebuilt and the sacrifices to start again. Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 9, and so forth. So, you don't think those people aren't going to think he hung the moon? If he lets them do that? Yeah.
Isn't that the falling, maybe I'm wrong, the falling away of the church in that period right
No.
there?
All
Am I
that's
wrong?
happened up to this point.
Okay.
And I know you guys are like some others coming in. Chapters just kind of give you a structure of Revelation. Remember, in chapter 1, verse 19, God said, write the things that you have seen, that you're seeing now, and that you're going to see. And that's the structure for Revelation. The things that John had seen was in chapter 1. He saw Jesus glorified, eyes of fire, feet of burning brass, and all that. Then chapters 2 and 3 were the things which were going on right then. And that was the church. The church had started in Acts 2. So what you had up to this point, and I'm sorry, I know this is really messy, but I'm trying to do the best I can. Y'all know my artwork is terrible. This is what we call the church age. And yes, during this time of the church age leading up to this, it gets worse and worse and worse. And of course, the last church is which one? Laodicean church age. And oh, we're rich. And God says, no, you're poor. Oh, we're something. Oh, you're blind. You're naked, man. You're a mess. You think you're awesome. I say you're a mess. You're terrible. You're backslidden. You're apostate. So that, just to answer your question, that happens in here. Okay? Right before the church is called out. There will be people saved during this time, correct? Remember chapter 7 talks all about them. Some will be beheaded because they're believers, and some will make it through this time. But it's going to be a horrible time for people to come to know Christ. Okay, does that answer that?
Yeah, like, okay, this is what
This is leading up, and
so
I could
that's
say
the falling
right.
away of the church up until then to the squiggly line here,
rapture.
or it just stops right
This
there.
is a rapture right here, where basically the church is taken out.
Because he's going to come on scene and he's going to rebuild the temple after that, correct?
Yes, this is the Antichrist does this. The Antichrist comes on the scene, and he comes on the scene, and there's peace for a little bit.
Okay.
And he allows Israel to restart worship, the sacrifices and all that. Anybody that could come on in the Middle East right now, allow Israel to be a sovereign state and do their sacrifices again and have peace over here, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that the world's going to say, well, this guy's cool. This is awesome. And so they're going to follow him. They'll climb the stinker, so to speak. They're going to follow him right here. All right. Now, to answer your question, I said we're here in Revelation chapter 17, 19. Right now we're not here. Right now we're right here somewhere, I think. We're right in this area right here waiting for Christ's return. Keeping our eyes to the sky, but working for the Lord as much as we can. So this is going to happen. It'd be neat if it happened while we were doing this class for us. I said, the Lord will come back. Boom, we meant to be gone, you know. Well, bobby pins float in the air for a second, you know. I like the cartoons, you know. Remember Bugs Bunny? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
That's just Jamie's hair. I don't know about the rest of you. Okay, all right. So, okay, am I good now, everybody? Is everybody good? I know we're doing a lot of review, but I think it's good. I think it's good. Now, we're coming back to where I was here. There's several possibilities to these two Babylons. And what I asked was, why would I say Jerusalem? Well, based on what I just said about the Antichrist and the worship getting restored, probably Jerusalem might be the center of that religious system. Could be. Also say Rome is a possibility. Why would I say that? Because she is situated on how many hills? 7 hills. What city in the world do we know that's famous for being the city on 7 hills? Rome. John knew that in his day. So it could be 2. And this is why I say in here, for those of you that are new, I don't get real dogmatic about certain things. I think one day we're going to, when we have our balcony seats and we're watching this, we're going to say, oh, that's how, I didn't even dream that that's the way it would be. I think we're going to be that way a lot. So I say when God is vague, I'm not going to get specific, but where God's specific, I'm not going to get vague. Then the plan of salvation is clear, so I'm going to be clear about that. But, you know, some of these things, boy, you can read different Bible students and scholars, and some say it's Jerusalem, some say it's Rome. It could be a combination of 2, or it could just be an unknown place. It could be just someplace totally unknown, or maybe some other way that fits this description. Probably Jerusalem and Rome are going to figure into this strongly. It seems to make sense to me. And so probably the religious headquarters, maybe this is a religious headquarters, maybe this is a political headquarters, I don't know. It seems as though at the end, when the Antichrist gets his army together, it's over in the Valley of Jezreel, which is near Jerusalem. So, you know, probably that may be his place of operation, or that just may be one of his places. We really don't know. So this government that he puts together is basically, if I understand it, the old Roman Empire put back together. Of course, Rome was crucial. In John's day, Rome was a big deal. So, tends to point to these two. And remember I told you, in the Old Testament, a lot of times when Israel got away from God, those prophets called Israel Egypt, Sodom. Remember that? He called them those names because it described where they were spiritually. They'd gotten away from Him. So he used that terminology. For instance, today, and I don't mean to pick on any particular group of people, but if I said, oh, that place is like San Francisco, what would come to mind? You see what I'm saying? Certain things would come to mind. Or if I'd say that place is like Chicago, I mean, you say, oh, everybody's getting murdered. So he described them as like Detroit, everybody's bankrupt, or whatever, you know. So to use the Babylon means that this is going to be a system, a religious system, that is anti-Christ and anti-God and anti-Christian. The political system is also going to be the same. Anti-Christ, anti-God. We don't need God. So the way our country was founded upon the Word of God, clearly, this is going to be founded on just the opposite. And don't we see the opposite happening in America right now? Don't we see the world going this direction? We will not have this man to reign over us. Man, I mean, it's so, I never dreamed in my lifetime I'd see what has happened in America. So are you with me on that? Yeah. I mean, honestly, and I can't believe what has happened so fast lately. Yeah. However, I don't think it happened fast. We just weren't watching. We weren't seeing it, and we weren't watching. I was in the house one day in my study, and I looked over at the wall, and I said, man, what's all that dirt on the wall? And I went over there, and there were little holes about every inch, and a little dirt pile at that hole. You know what that was? Termites. And because that's where the seam was, between the two sheets of sheetrock. They could bore through that real easy. And when I realized that, we found out they were everywhere. And we, of course, had the house. Fortunately, we didn't have to tent the house, but we did have to have the house thoroughly treated. Well, they had been in there a long time doing their work. We just didn't know they were there. We didn't see them. So what I'm getting at is termites have been at work for decades and decades in America, undermining the Word of God, undermining biblical principles and so forth. And so now we see a brazenness, a hatred of Christians, which is coming. They're worried about everybody getting bullied. They don't seem to be worried about Christians getting bullied. You know, that seems to be on the menu. So you're seeing this anti-Christ, anti-God. Stay in the Word. Pray. Have your quiet time. Read your Bible. Have Christian friends that you make good relationships with. Because I really believe in my heart of hearts we're going to go through some stuff and we're going to need each other just like they did in John's day when he's on the Isle of Patmos in prison for what he believed in. So, you know, I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm just trying to get you to realize that unlike one of my kinfolk who said, well, I think everything's going to be wonderful until Jesus takes us out of here and then it gets bad. And I said, well, 2 Timothy 3 says that perilous times are going to come and things are going to get worse and worse before Jesus comes back. So, anyway, just some practical advice, okay? Just be close to the Lord and be strong in the Lord. Because I think we're going to have to take a stand for what we believe in before it's all over. Verse 3. So the angel took me in the Spirit into the wilderness, which I think is kind of cool. Isn't that what the Spirit did to Jesus in Matthew 4? Temptation. And not that John's being tempted here, but there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that had 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, once again, the 7 heads are those 7 hills. So you've got 7 heads, or hills, it's referred to later. That seems to point to Rome. There's also 10 horns. Where does that take us back to? What does that connect with biblically? What book in the Bible? Daniel. Connects us with Daniel, big time. So these 10 horns are the 10 kings, the power. So here you have these two together. She's riding the beast. You have the 7 heads, the 7 hills. You have the 10 horns, the beast, okay? Or as Nebuchadnezzar's statue, the 10 toes, whatever. The 10 toes, 10 horns, same thing. Now remember in Daniel, the Antichrist is one of these horns. Remember, he's a little horn.
Yeah.
And he comes on and overwhelms 3 in such a way that the other ones say, oh, okay, you're in charge. Now we don't know how that is. It could be politically, it could be militarily, it could be economically, it could be with a weapon. We don't know. And that's where I say, it's fun to speculate, it's fun to dream, it's fun to discuss, but we just don't know. We do know this. The little horn overwhelms 3 of the horns some way to convince the other ones to give their power to him. And then that's the Antichrist that takes over. So 10 horns, 10 toes statue in Daniel. And I'm talking that way because most of you were in my Daniel study. You can't read the book of Leviticus without reading the book of Hebrews. You can't read the book of Daniel without reading the book of Revelation. They go hand in hand. They connect together. Now, maybe I'm giving you stuff, horns and heads and stuff. Well, I can't go back and explain all these now because we've already been through this country. And I'll look all this up. But this is in Daniel. This describes these 2 Babylons, the political power, the governmental power of the Antichrist. He uses a religious Babylon, the great harlot, to accomplish his goals. But when he is done, as you go see in this chapter, this destroys this because it was used for the advantage. The woman sitting on a scarlet beast, the beast is carrying her. The government is carrying the religion. Gee, I thought we were supposed to have separation of church and state. Obviously, the Antichrist didn't read about that. I was talking to somebody today, as most of you know, in 2010 when I was campaigning to be a city commissioner. I had so many people, or not so many, but I had quite a few people come up and say, I don't think a pastor ought to run because, you're separation of church and state. Well, obviously, they've not studied the founding of our country and don't have a clue how our nation was founded, and I'll just leave that alone. But I always carried a constitution with me. And I would take that out and I said, okay, well, show me where that's at in here, you know. And it was kind of funny because they might as well have it upside down or Chinese because they hadn't read it. They didn't know what was in the Constitution. I said, well, let me help you. It's here, you know. But here, obviously, the two are married together. The woman, of course, there's blasphemies against God written all over it. This is anti-God. We hate God. The woman wore purple and scarlet, which obviously the scarlet is connected with the red beast, the scarlet beast that we saw just up the previous verse. So that seems to be the big color for the Antichrist. That seems to be his identifying color of scarlet. Gee, what were the Romans big into? I think they were kind of big into scarlet too, weren't they? Into red, if I remember right. So we see another kind of connection there with the old Roman Empire, which is what the Antichrist want to revive, which is basically Europe and the Middle East. In her hand, well, she's got all this clothing, beautiful jewelry made of gold and precious gems and pearls. So this is a rich religious system. Okay, this is a very wealthy religious system. In fact, you almost see a caste system in the tribulation time. You see a class of extremely wealthy people, and you see a class of extremely poor people. And it's almost kind of like India in a way. It's that caste system where you really have no middle class, seemingly. And of course, with all the things that happen, it makes sense why a lot of people will be very poor and a lot of people will be very rich. And yeah, folks, I hate to say it, but that's exactly where we're headed in America right now. We're headed that same direction. What would happen if you took all the Christians out, and people who wanted abortion or wanted whatever topic you wanted to pick, didn't have any opposition, basically. They could just about do whatever they would want to do, but they're not. And that's what you have right here. That's what you have. You have just no opposition. And, well, you see the wealth, precious gems, pearls, gold. So this is a extremely rich church. I'm not picking on the Catholic Church right now, but remember back in the 13, 14, 1500s when the Catholics got away from what they should have been doing, present the gospel of Jesus Christ, and they became a rich, wealthy church by basically taxing people, basically what they did. But anyway, it became a very corrupt church at that time, and gold, I mean, peasant people, but the church was full of gold, right? See what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
I'm trying to picture that, help you picture this, what's going on here. Now she has a gold goblet full of obscenities and impurities of her immorality. One thing about Babylon, I apologize for being warm in here. Our air is going out on this side. We're getting ready to replace it. But obviously, we haven't yet. Plus, you got this guy up here just spewing out hot air left and right. You have this rich church. And I think the term Babylon is used because it represents trying to do a tower and doing life without God and government without God. But I think also a lot of the elements that are in this religious system are going to be the old Babylonian religion. As I mentioned before, Star Wars is a fun movie, but man, it's full of Babylonian religion. The Force, that's Babylonian. The dark side, Luke, the Force, and going down the dark side, that's all Babylonian stuff. It's just been repackaged, redressed to look like modern stuff. All this channeling and all that, that's Babylonian stuff, all of that. So we see that coming on the scene today. Nobody call it New Age and call it other stuff. It's just old Babylonianism is all it is. The Zodiac, that was big with Babylon. I could go on and on about things I really like. Mysterious name was written on her forehead. Babylon the Great, mother of all prostitutes and obscenities in the world. So this is typical Old Testament talk in a way. It's the words that the Old Testament prophets would have used and so forth. Very familiar to John. So what this is a religious system that hates Christ, hates Christians, hates everything about our God. All right, that's what this is. And also, it's connected in with demonic powers. As we've already seen, all the demonic powers that manifest themselves. You read the book of Revelation, man, the Hades is open, and man, they come out there about gangloads, and they're weird and perverted and distorted and all that. So, And I could see that she was drunk. Now, why was she drunk? What was she drunk on?
Blood of the saints.
Yeah.
Murdering the saints.
So it lets you know what's going to happen to Christian people during this time. They're going to be hunted down. They're going to be killed. Probably crucified. Probably whatever. We know they're going to be beheaded. So all these things are happening, and there's almost a picture of her just being so excited about doing all of this that she's just drunk. You know, like an excited drunk would be. And I mean, it's sick. I mean, just think about it. She's inflamed with excitement because Christians are dying and they're being killed. And this gets the religious system of the world excited to be killing Christians.
She's drinking
Yeah,
blood wine.
yeah. I don't know that she actually took a goblet and drank the real blood. I'm thinking this is probably symbolic language. I think we can pretty well relate to that and so forth. Yeah,
It's
but
probably blood wine, you know.
yeah, well, whatever. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I want to get that scientific, but anyway.
I'm thinking about
Now-
Star Wars. Or
Now
something
just
like
think,
that.
yeah, just think of what John has seen up to this point. He's seen some like really incredible stuff. I think stuff that he couldn't even describe. It was just wow, you know. And look what he says. I stared at her in complete amazement. So this whole idea to John that there would be this kind of a gruesome, intense. Now remember, this is a guy that was living during the days of the Caesars. And he is in prison right now because of his faith. Yet this is so bloodthirsty and perverted and sick that he is just in shock at what he's saying. The angel said, "Why are you so amazed? I tell you the mystery of this woman and the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns on which she sits. The beast you saw was once alive, but isn't now, and yet he will soon come up out of the bottomless pit." Now remember, the Antichrist dies. All right, the beast is a governmental system, the Antichrist ahead of it. He dies. Chapter 13. Who brings him back to life?
My back won't go
False
there.
False prophet, his right-hand person, the head of the religious system, brings him back to life. That's a copy of the resurrection. He dies. I think he's channeled, whatever you want to call it, incarnated by Satan. That's a copy of the incarnation, Jesus Christ. Satan copies everything, so it's a copycat. Trying to deceive people. He came up out of the bottomless pit in 1117, but he's going to go to destruction. The people who belong to this world. Now here's an important truth. The people who belong to this world, whose names were not written in the book of life before the world was made, will be amazed at the reappearance of this beast who had died. So they're going to really be sucked in by this resurrection imitation. They're going to be just sucked in by it. Now, we get to this next section. And I'm going to have to say, I'm not really sure, but I'm going to give you my thoughts on it, okay? This calls for a mind of understanding. Maybe that's why I don't understand it. But anyway, I think I got a little bit of a grasp on here. The 7 heads of the beast represent the 7 hills where the woman rules. Now, that could be Rome. That makes sense. That would be Rome. I'm not sure where Islam's headed. I'm not sure where Catholicism is headed. I'm not sure where anything's headed. All I know is I think all these are going to come together. Somebody's going to bring all this together. Okay? They also represent 7 kings. 5 kings have already fallen. The 6th now reigns, and the 7th is yet to come, but his reign will be brief, and then the scarlet beast is the 8th. Okay. Does anybody have a clue? It's kind of confusing, isn't it? What in the world? Well, let me get rid of a little bit of this, because y'all have the map, you have the charts and stuff for the tribulation. Let me try to show you what I think this is. Oh, I'm supposed to raise better now. Let me get a different color. Hey, let's see if that works. There you go. It says that 5 have already fallen, and the 6th is now. So that's going to be kind of the key to unlock this. The 6th is now. So what is happening in John's day that is now for him? Another one's going to come. It'll be a short one. And then the Antichrist, the scarlet beast, the governmental one world government system, is going to be the 8th. I think these kings represent kingdoms. And I think we're talking about Egypt and Assyria, and Babylon, the Medo-Persian Empire, Greece, and what came after Greece? Rome. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 have come and one is. Now, does that make more sense? Okay. Now, you might say, yeah, but another one comes, it's short. All right, let me tell you how I think this works. This is fun. Now, I'm not etching this in stone. And somebody may come along and say, well, I think, that's great, man, think on. Because you know what? It ain't going to really matter to us because we're going to have balcony seats watching all this, okay? But it's interesting to study to see what's going to go on. I think these are the 5 kings, these 5 kingdoms. 5 have already come and gone. One is, and then another one's going to come. Now, another one's coming, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I wish I'd done it so I could have got them all in one line. Well, I guess I can. 7 is coming, but it's going to be a little short one, right? And then this Antichrist now, at the end, is going to be the 8th, right? At the end of the tribulation time.
Assyria.
Now, let's draw a gap in here. And let's say that this right here is the time of the Gentiles. Now remember, Daniel talked about that there would come a time, because Daniel's prophesying in the book of Daniel about the Jews, his people. Okay? Everything in there was about his people. And we know that there were 70 weeks of Daniel. 69 of them have been fulfilled and already taken care of, that led up to Christ. And we now have this gap waiting for the 70th week of Daniel to be fulfilled, which is a week of years, or 7 years, which is a tribulation time. Okay, everybody? You're kind of with me a little bit? If you're not familiar with the 70 weeks, I'm probably losing you here right now, but that's okay. You can go back and study that. What I'm getting at is, the time period between here and what I'm going to tell you is here is a big time period. But we are living in that time period right now, the church age, and that gap between the crucifixion and the tribulation time. That's a big gap, right? Okay. I think this is the first half of the tribulation time, and this is the last half. Okay? Because when the Antichrist comes on the scene, number 7, he rules just a short time. 3.5 years is pretty short, is it not? Then he dies, but then he's brought back to life, but he ain't the same guy when he comes back. He's bad on steroids. And he's the one that is going to be the 8th one, is going to be that scarlet beast. That's the best I can do with that, okay? So, you might say, oh, man, you're on Mars. Okay, well, I know that, but that's the best I can get out of the 5 kings. I've seen people try to make these Caesars, and the current Caesar that was on the throne then, and then the next one, of course, Nero's going to come back. I've heard all sorts of different theories and stories, but this seems to fit it best to me. Okay?
So number 8, you're saying that actually he's Satan.
Yeah. I'm saying this is the Antichrist before he dies, and this is him after he dies, which is that scarlet beast. He's still the Antichrist.
Yeah.
But, if you study the tribulation time, and when the Antichrist dies, up to that point he's been trying to bring peace, and he's been kind of a world leader. But after that, man, Satan comes down. Where does he go? I think he goes into that guy. And he knows he has a short time, and he spews out a flood, and he's trying to kill Christians. He's trying to kill every Jew on the planet. I mean, he is Hitler to the nth power. So that's what you have. So I think that this one who rules a short time is the Antichrist before he dies, 3.5 years. And then the 8th one is the beast, the red scarlet beast. That's the best I know how to explain that. If that's not it, then I don't know what it is. And you know what? I don't have to know what it is. My salvation doesn't depend upon me knowing that. It depends on me knowing Jesus died on the cross, paid for my sins, a basket in my heart. Bang, I'm good to go. All right. So that's the most important thing, all right?
Right.
Aren't you glad your salvation doesn't depend upon you knowing what this really is?
Yeah, really.
So anyway, The scarlet beast, verse 11, is the 8th. He is like the other 7, and he too is headed for destruction. You know, the leaders of these nations were not the leader, but leaders in these nations were pretty sick. Even in Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar was a picture of both the Antichrist and Christ. He was a picture of both. He was one of the few that was a double dip there. So, you had Alexander the Great here, and you had some crazy Caesars, and you had some crazy pharaohs. Just look at Israel, trying to get out of there. So, he's headed for destruction. The 10 horns of the beast are 10 kings who have not risen to power yet. Now, these 10 kings are the ones in John's day had not risen to power. Maybe even in our day yet, not all of them haven't risen to power. But they represent that European Middle East confederacy, the old Roman Empire, which would be basically southern Europe and the Middle East. And it depends on when you're talking about Rome in John's day. Now remember also too, I think I told you as we were going through there in Daniel, that don't try to make these 10 kings 10 modern nations today. Because there are more than 10 nations in Europe right now. What I think is being referred to here are 10 groups of people. Europe is made up of 10 tribes of people, the Lombards and the Visigoths, and you go and study the ancient stuff and everything. And so people have asked me, how do you think America fits into this? Well, America could just be, we're across the pond, and we talked last week about how all the destruction on the earth, I doubt there's going to be very many airplanes flying around. Boats are going to be wiped out. I doubt there's going to be much transportation. We may just be out here by ourselves and not doing anything. Or, and I'm going to throw a good one at you here. What if America is part of Europe? Because where did all the people in America come from? They came basically, not everybody, but basically we're Europe West.
Yeah.
What if the merchant city of Babylon is New York? Ooh, you ever think of that?
Yeah.
You see, they're going to see the city destroyed from the ocean, the ship, so it's got to be a port city. Well, Rome fits into that too.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't go out here and say, oh, he thinks it's New York. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying,
Hey.
just dream and think of it, What do you think, what was attacked over 10 years ago was a major center of commerce in the world.
Hey, the UN is there.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to fit.
Pastor Fred,
Yes.
I know we haven't gotten there yet, but at some point, isn't there supposed to be some type of a land bridge that fills in and then kings can cross or something? Isn't that?
We did cover that. That was one of the vials where the river Euphrates is
Okay.
dried up so the kings of the east can come across.
Okay.
Obviously, the Orient isn't on board with the Antichrist plans and what he wants to do, and they are going to come against him. You might say, well, why would they drop up a river? They can fly airplanes. Remember we talked about that last week? I don't think there's going to be a lot of airplanes in the air. You got solar things happening where it's going to be hot, scorch people. You're going to have EMP stuff going around all the time. I'm not sure there's going to... I almost believe, and I said this last week, this tribulation time, I almost wonder if we don't get very far into it, if we ain't back to the horse and buggy days. I kind of wonder. I wonder if technology is going to be there. I mean, you start burning up half the trees and a third of the trees and things hitting the ocean and wipe out a third of the ship. You don't think it is going to cause critical damage to the planet? And all that volcanic ash in the air.
Think how many planes are dropping?
Well,
Yeah,
guess
I mean,
what?
I just think we're going to be back, not in the Stone Age, but we're going to just about. Remember I talked about the movie Core? I'm a sci-fi guy, sorry. And you've got those gaps in and it burns everybody and messes up all the electronics and everything. I think early on when these first seals are opened up and you have war like you wouldn't believe, and forth, the people are killed, and then there's famine, and then there's pestilence because of disease, because that's the natural flow. When you have war, then you have famine, then you have disease. That's just a natural flow. When you have that extensive of we're not talking about a little battle in the Middle East. We're talking about world stuff. We're talking about major battles. So when you have that going on, I'm just not sure there's going to be much flying here and flying there and all that sort of stuff. And that's why there's, I think, an emphasis on ships. Because you get in a boat and go anywhere, you don't necessarily need a computer, you need the stars and stuff. But anyway, And that's in the weeds, but I'm having fun, okay? Just put up with me, all right? I get lost in the weeds, guys, all the time. I'm just coming out of the weeds. They all agree. Wait a minute. They will be appointed to their kingdoms for a brief time to reign with the beast, and then they agree to give him his power and authority. And we can go back to Daniel 7, Daniel 9, where the one horn, the little horn, overwhelms the others in such a way that all of them give to him. So that's what this is talking about here. By the way, think about something. Little horns aren't necessarily on little animals, because I've seen some little animals with some big horns. Little horns are also on young animals. What nations are kind of young on the planet right now? Gee, would America be one of those? Just a thought, just a thought. I'm not saying the Antichrist is going to rule from America or anything, but I'm just saying where people say, how does America fit in? Well, of course, in John's day, they didn't even know there was they thought you'd fall off the earth, remember? Even Columbus. So, I don't know how it's going to work. I'm just giving you some things to think about over coffee in the morning, okay? That's all I'm doing. Together they will go to war against the Lamb. I know I have people listening to YouTube be throwing stuff at the computer. Oh, he's an idiot. You're right. But I have fun. Okay, together they go to war against the Lamb. I mean, that's what it's all about. They hate God. They hate Christ. They go to war because we know in chapter 19 is that final battle. Battle in Esdraelon, the Valley of Jezreel. We call it the Battle of Armageddon. It's really in the Valley of Megiddo, where I said that Napoleon said it was the coolest place on the planet to have a battle. He stood there and looked and told me, this, if you ever had a war, this is where you want to have one, right here. That's where it's going to take place. So, together they war against the Lamb, but what's going to happen? The Lamb will defeat them. Why? Because he has a great strategy. Oh man, he's God. He's King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And there's no match for that. And you have to be stupid to think you could go up against that and win, but who said the devil was smart in terms of really believing the Bible or anything? Then the angel said to me, well, he'll defeat them because he's King of Kings, and his called and chosen and faithful ones will be with him. Now, we could jump over to chapter 19, but we won't because we'll be there next week, where we come back with, at this point again in tribulation, the church somewhere in here goes up, but then we come back with him, and you're going to get to ride a horse. You're going to get to ride one. And we come back, it's going to be a special horse. It's going to be like Pegasus, man, you know what I'm saying? So, that'll be cool. We're going to come back with him, and it's really not a battle, correct? A battle's where people go back and forth, and somebody wins, and somebody loses, and wins, and eventually somebody wins. Jesus comes back, and they just evaporate. They just are annihilated. There's no battle to it. We'll get that in chapter 19. I'm jumping ahead. I don't want to go into a lot of detail on it. I'm just letting you know where that's at. The angel said to me, the waters, and here's why we know there's symbolism in this, because he explains the symbolism right here. In verse 15, the waters where the prostitute is ruling represents masses of people of every nation and language. The scarlet beast and his 10 horns all love the prostitute because that religious system has helped them accomplish their goals. Is that what it says? What they do? They hate. All the time that they're using this religious system for their goal, they hate it. Okay? They will strip her naked, eat her flesh, and burn her remains with fire. So when the Antichrist is done with the religious system, is it going to have a happy ending? No. For God has put a plan in their minds, and a plan that will carry out his purposes. They will agree to give their authority to the scarlet beast, and so the words of God will be fulfilled. And this woman you saw in your vision represents the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. So, is that great city Rome? Is it Jerusalem? Is it some city we don't know about yet? New York, New York? We don't know. You know, we really don't know. So there's possibilities here. It's fun to think about what they might be. There seems to be some indication, being it's sitting on 7 hills, that Rome is that. So, and of course, we know that that's a Catholic church at this time. So how does that fit into it? How does that play into it? Obviously, I've got a lot of Catholic friends who know the Lord Jesus Christ as their Savior, and they'll go up with us. There's a story about a guy who was taking a tour in heaven, and he had been a member of a Baptist church. And, he was there and getting the tour, and he looked in there and he said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, that's such and such and such and such." Looked down there and saw another door, and he heard some singing behind it. He said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, be real quiet. There's the Baptists in there. They think they're the only ones up here." So anyway, so now you know who I think is going to. I think a lot more people are going to go up in this than just Baptists. Somebody asked me if I was so narrow-minded that I believed only Baptists were going to heaven. And I said, no, I'm more narrow-minded than that. I don't think half of them are going to make it. So. Matthew 7, many will say to me, and it's funny, we laugh, but it's also sad.
Yes.
So many people are going to think I went to church and I did this, or I gave money, or whatever. Jesus said, no, so you got to know me. It's a personal relationship. Okay, any questions on 17? It took us almost an hour to get through 17. I have 10, 15 minutes to get through 18.
Sorry, bear with me.
No, this is good, this is good.
Okay. I know Revelations is crazy symbolic.
Mhm.
Okay, everything is symbolic here.
But as I said, let me jump in before you came in. Don't look for symbols first. Take it at face value, then look for symbols. That's a good approach. Because if you look for symbols first, you'll start symbolizing the cross. Well, Jesus didn't really down the cross. That's just a figure of speech. See what I'm saying? We have to be careful of looking for symbols first. We look for the real, literal meaning first, then we look for symbols, and you're right, this book is full of symbols. Because this is about a lot of future stuff where symbols have a lasting value. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. So 7 and 8 up here, the Antichrist and the beast. Okay. Now in the Bible, I read it like everybody else, but my take is, the Antichrist and Satan, they're the same, right? They're the same person. I know it's not like Jesus, one and the same thing, but you know.
You have the dragon, the red dragon in chapter 12, which is clearly identified as Satan. You have the Antichrist, which is clarified as the beast in 13a. You have the false prophet, which is clarified in chapter 13b. You have here a copycat, an unholy trinity. You have Satan at the point because he wants to be worshipped, and he uses these guys for his ends. Okay? So you have the Father and the Son and the Spirit. You have an evil parallel. See what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So when the Antichrist dies right here, halfway through, where I put my squiggly line, he dies here. We just read about that. We also can read about that in 13. The false prophet brings him back to life, and Mars go back up. Shazam, I can't believe this. Jesus comes back from the dead, and it's like, well, no, he didn't. He didn't do that. This guy comes back from the dead, and everybody's going to believe him. Okay? So the Jews have been on board up to this point until the Antichrist tells them to do what? Worship this statue. The false prophet makes a statue resembling the Antichrist, kind of like Nebuchadnezzar did. That's where he's kind of a picture of this. He makes a statue that moves and talks. That's pretty cool. Okay? It's going to deceive a lot of people. But the Jews say, wait a minute, I know the Ten Commandments. And you're not supposed to have graven images, and you're not supposed to worship them. And all of a sudden they're going to say, wait a minute, we are following the wrong guy. And they're going to turn, and he's going to turn on them. And that treaty he made here to let them worship and everything, he's going to cause it to cease. All the sacrifices in Daniel chapter 9 at the end of that chapter. He's going to cause those sacrifices to cease, quit. So he turns on them, and it even says in chapter 13 that he goes after them like a flood. And of course God helps them hide. Which brings me to a verse that I think there are certain, I've been threatening to write a book for a long time. Most misunderstood verses in the Bible, or misused, applied. A lot of times we use that verse in Matthew 25, where it says, I was thirsty and you gave me water. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you visited me. As much as you've done to the least of these, my brother, you've done to me. A lot of people use it for their food pantry. They use it for missions. That's okay, but that's not what that verse is dealing with. That verse is dealing with this time right here, where Jews are in prison being killed, and Christian people are ministering to them during this time. And Jesus said, as much as you've done it to those my brethren, you've done it to me. And so a lot of Christians during this time are going to be trying to help the Jews save their necks. And that's really what that verse is applied to. If you read Matthew 25, Jesus is talking about this time period right here. Okay, so, okay, I know that's in the weeds, but I just had fun. Chapter 18. Yeah, go ahead. Yes,
Along
sir.
that same line, when I again, going back to when I was a kid, during the Second World War, when Hitler was going after the Jews so strongly, that, what you just said, was said constantly in the media about the Allies helping the Jews going in there.
Yeah.
And that's why Hitler was, at that time, Hitler was felt to be the Antichrist.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was convincing people that the Jews were the problem, but we just get rid of them, everything will be okay.
You know, someone is teaching that on TV today, what he just mentioned.
Yeah. And you know what's really funny? I mean, it's kind of funny, not funny, was when Hitler had the Olympics in Berlin.
1936.
And he's
I
going to
remember
show
that.
them that the Aryan race is superior. And who goes over there
Jesse Owens.
and runs over everybody? I love that thing. God's got a great sense of humor, doesn't he? So anyway, Jesse Owens, black as could be, goes over there and wins everything, man. Just outruns everybody. So anyway, oh, Hitler had to be dying. He had to be dying.
When he got up and left, when
Yes.
he left the stadium and never presented the award to Jesse Owens.
Yeah, he did. That's right.
Really? Oh.
Now, we saw what happens to this one, right? Okay, chapter 17. The beast is sick of her riding him. He turns around and destroys him. All right, now verse chapter 18. I won't make it all the way through, but we'll get as far as, can you let me get as far as I can? Are y'all hot and miserable and have to go, or can we go a little bit longer? Okay? If you get hot and need to leave, please feel free to do so.
Commercial Babylon.
Fall of Babylon. You might say, wait a minute, we just had a Babylon fall. Yeah, we did, the religious one. Now we're going to look at the government one. After this, I saw another angel come down from heaven with great authority. Revelation helps us to understand that there are ranks of angels. There's some with great power and great authority, just like there are certain fallen angels, demons, with great authority and power. Now look what happens here. The earth grew bright with his splendor. This angel just comes on the scene and the earth starts to glow. That's pretty cool, isn't it? It's the glory of God. Here the Antichrist is trying to take it over. All one angel has to do is come and he makes the whole place glow. You know what I'm saying? He gave a mighty shout. Babylon is fallen, that great city. Remember now I said it's referred to as a city, not an empire. She has become a home for demons. She is a hideout for every foul spirit, a hideout for every foul vulture, and every foul and dreadful animal. Now notice it says Babylon is fallen, the great city is fallen. Fallen is mentioned twice. It could be a reference to these two, or it could just be an emphasis, saying it twice. Kind of like I do on Sunday morning when I make a point, I might repeat it. And you might want to write down 1 Peter 5:13 over Babylon. Because Peter uses a symbol speak when he's talking about Rome. What does he call it? He calls it Babylon. So, could be, this kind of leans a little more credit to this maybe what Babylon is all about. Religious and governmental, but who knows? Now, there's much repeat here, so that's why I think I can go a little bit faster. Obviously, the governmental system uses a religious system and pagan idolatry. And when you go back, for those that have been in class, the ancient pagan religions were sicko perverted. I mean sick, sick, sick. The worship, we go to a worship service on Sunday morning, right? When they went to a worship service, it involved having sex with a prostitute. That was their religious service. Plus all the other wacky demonic things they did during all that, okay? So, and it wasn't always a man and woman. It could have been mixed, it could have been with an animal. It could have been, I mean, there's all kinds of, and I'm not going to go any further, okay? I mean, you study the ancient religions and it's sick, man. The Canaanites were practicing that plus more than I could ever describe. When Joshua came in, that's why God was judging both nations and moving them out, because they were so sick. All right? That's what this is right here. All right? Now, the kings of the earth have committed adultery with her, so this not only affected, it's the political leaders, the kings. Because of her desires for what? Here's the riches again, extravagant luxury. The merchants of the world have grown rich. Then I heard another voice calling from heaven, come up. Now here's a call for Christians to separate. That's our call. We live in the world, but we don't have to live like the world. We can love people, but we don't need to love the world system. And that's why when you see the word world, God so loved the world. Then John says in 1 John 2:15, love not the world. Well, wait a minute, is that a contradiction? No, world can mean people, It can mean philosophical system against God. It can mean the planet, the dirt planet that we live on. So you have to, God so loved the world. He loved people. He loved humanity. He loved the race of human beings so much he went to the cross. John says don't love the world. He's talking about the world system. He's talking about this stuff. The world system that says riches is all there is. We don't need God, blah, blah, blah. Then I heard another voice, come away from her, just as Israel was called out of Egypt and the church is called out of the world. Do not take part in her sins, or you will be punished with her. And the punishments, we already seen all the punishments that have happened, and there's going to be plagues and all sorts of stuff. Her sins are piled as high as the heavens. God remembers her evil deeds. Due to her, as she has done to others, double her penalty for all her evil deeds. She brewed a cup of terror, so obviously terror and threat is part of this. If you don't participate in this, you're put to death, you're beheaded. And I don't think it's going to be the clean guillotine French beheading. I think it's going to be more like Daniel Perlman, when they take a rusty old saw and slowly saw your neck off. I mean, folks, I'm just trying to let you know what's coming, okay? You just got to really realize. I think sometimes we have it so comfortable in America, we can't, hard time to relate to this. And Daniel Perlman, what was that, 10 years ago or longer that happened?
Yeah.
And that brutality, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about here. She boasted in her heart. She glorified her. What's what she does? Of course, she's rich and wealthy. She's glorifying herself in verse 7. She's boasting, I am the queen on my throne. I cannot help but think of that place out outside of Orlando, Queen of Heaven of the Universe or something.
Oh, yeah, Mary
Mary, yeah, something, okay. I wonder how all that's going to tie in. I don't know. Maybe Orlando is going to be the city. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I knew I could have some fun with that. So these plagues will overtake her in a single day, death and war. So judgment's going to come quickly. She'll be completely consumed with fire, for the Lord who judges her is almighty. That's chapter 19. When we get there, we'll come back to this quick destruction. Now, not just the merchants, but the kings of the world. We see today, now more than ever before, how business and government are tied together. All right. The kings have committed adultery with her, and they enjoyed her great luxury, took advantage of it. I'm sure they went to those services, and they were part of it, and they're leaders in that perverted sick church and all that. They see the smoke rising from the charred remains. They stand at a distance, terrified. They will cry out, how terrible for you, O Babylon, you great city. In a single moment, God's judgments come upon you. So, just as this political Babylon, the beast, turns and destroys this, and seemingly very quickly, so too this is destroyed by the Lord very quickly. And that happens in chapter 19 when we get there. The merchants of the world will weep and mourn because they can't make any more money. Are they sad because they messed up and didn't get Jesus right? No, they're out of money. Because she bought great quantities of silver. So it seems like this government religious system, everything's going to flow through it. There will not be so much one-on-one commerce. Everything's going to flow through it. And I mean, all the stuff that's mentioned here, the only thing that's probably, you don't know what it is Fian wood. That's a North African wood. It's very, very expensive and beautiful. Rome people took advantage of that. We don't hear much about it anymore here. And all the spices. And what's the last thing mentioned in that list? Slavery. Folks, we are so fast headed to slavery. We are so fast headed to that. And that's what I'm talking about, this caste system, where you have this extreme wealth at the top end with the religion and the merchants and the business and the government leaders, and then a big gap, and then all the peasants down below. You're going to have that kind of a system in this time period. The fancy things you love so much are gone, all your luxuries, and I don't know that we need to really read through all this here. I mean, the city, this Babylon, whatever it is destroyed. And ship owners had become wealthy, so forth. So let's go on over to verse 20. This is just a destruction, this being destroyed here. Now, verse 20 starts a little bit different tone. This is a time of celebration. We're getting ready to, you might say, well, how's it all going to end? Chapter 19 is how it's all going to end. Rejoice over her fate, O heaven and people of earth. We're rejoicing because this is an anti-God, hate Christians, hate God's people, hate Jesus' system. So when that goes down, just like when Hitler went down, everybody in the world rejoiced, didn't they? Danced in the streets in New York. This is going to be way worse than Hitler ever thought about being. And people in heaven are going to be rejoicing, and those of us that come back to the earth, and believers who are making it through this point. O heaven and people of God and apostles and prophets, for at last God has judged for your sakes. Remember in chapter 7, that golden bowl representing the prayers of the saints. And I said some of those are like, God, when are you ever going to straighten all this out? Those prayers are getting answered here in all this. Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a huge millstone, which is pretty big. He threw it into the ocean and shouted, just like this, the great city of Babylon. So he's just illustrating how quick it's going to happen. Boom! Just like that. Never to be found again. And so all the music that was there, harp, singers, flutes, and trumpets, oh man, they must have been into jazz. I don't know. Anyway, all the music that's going on there will never be heard again, craftsmen. So it's an end. It's a total end here. Obviously, people are going to get married there, like Vegas, for brides and grooms, so there goes, just all kinds of things that we can infer here. Maybe we're trying to infer too much. For your merchants were the greatest in the world. You deceived the nations with your sorceries. Now, so this religious system is very demonic. It's very witchcraft-oriented. It's very perverted. In your streets flowed the blood of the prophets of God's holy people. That kind of points back to Rome, or Jerusalem, doesn't it? So it's kind of hard, or maybe it's referring to just the blood of the prophets during the tribulation time that were killed in Rome, or is it a reference to the prophets of the past that were killed? Here again, I don't know. Somewhere over there, God's holy people and the people who were slaughtered all around the world. So, chapter 19, we're going to bring things to a conclusion with the return of Christ to the earth. Really covered 18 pretty fast there, but I didn't really see any need reading through all that, going through all that. It's just all that we realize it's the center of wealth, it's the center of commerce. You can't buy or trade unless you have a mark of the beast, and all that's going on, and it crashes down. When we get to the end of this chapter, we are now at the end, I think, of the last parenthetical section. Everything from here on is timeline. Okay? And 2, it took chapters 4 through 19 to cover 7 years, but the 1,000-year reign of Christ is covered in like 2 or 3 verses in chapter 20, So, you say, we get the millennium, man, we're going to cover a lot of verses. Well, it doesn't work that way. All right, any questions up to this point? You good?
Fred,
I'll have materials for you all next week. I apologize.
the people who are left, that don't make it in the rapture.
Okay.
Okay, now, are those people, and bear with me here, are
No, you're
those
good.
the people God
By the way,
chooses to?
you go turn it off if you want to, and anybody's free to go. We usually hang around and ask questions and stuff. Yeah.
Okay, the people that are
Thanks,
left
bud.
here, is that